Hi, good afternoon, students. Welcome back to this live class. Here is a quote in order to create a positive attitude among us. So please listen. There is only one difference between aim and dream. Dream requires effortless sleep, and aim requires sleepless efforts. Sleep for dreams and wake up for aims. Okay, and today's session we wish to talk about structure of spinal cord, reflex action, and autonomous nervous system. All these topics are from the lesson sensation and responses. Don't you remember the structure of brain and the function of each part of brain? Okay, both this brain and spinal cord are the part of central nervous system. Well, then see the diagram. Here, spinal cord. We have studied brain is well protected inside a bony tissue. That is cranium. Here, spinal cord is also protected inside a bony tissue. That is vertebral column. The different parts of spinal cord are, you can see, sensory neuron. Actually, this is dorsal root. And here you can see motor neuron, that is ventral root. Then gray matter, white matter, these two things you have studied already. It is very familiar. It is related to myelin sheath. All these things you know. Then spinal nerve, then central canal. So what about the protection of the spinal cord? Spinal cord is well protected inside vertebral column. Like brain, it also covered by three-layered meninges. That is also a method of protection. Then the central canal is present. Central canal. Here we can see cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid is abbreviated as CSF. So cerebrospinal fluid is present inside the central canal. Then, as I said earlier, dorsal root that consists of sensory neuron. So that comes towards the spinal cord through dorsal side. That is why it is called dorsal root, means in our body through the back side. Then motor neuron was used to make the ventral root that comes towards the spinal cord through ventral side. So here I should write dorsal root and ventral root. So dorsal root is made up of sensory neuron, while the ventral root, here we can see the ventral root that is made up of motor neuron. Ventral root. So what are the two neurons? They are sensory neuron and motor neuron. Sensory neuron means here dorsal root is made up of sensory neuron, ventral root is made up of motor neuron. Based on the part they reaches to the spinal cord and also coming from the spinal cord. Then gray matter. The other two terms are gray matter and white matter. The part of the neuron wherever it is myelinated, that is known as white matter. The part of the neuron wherever it is non-myelinated, that portion is known as gray matter. Okay, in the case of in the case of spinal cord, white matter is present outside and gray matter is present inside. What about the cerebrum? Yes, just opposite. White matter is inside and gray matter is outside, of course. Then, the function of the sensory neuron or dorsal root. So, in this word sensory, it carries impulses from different body parts, especially from the sense organ towards the spinal cord. That is done by dorsal root or sensory neuron. Impulses from spinal cord coming to our different parts of the body through ventral root or motor neuron. Then both sensory neuron and motor neuron or dorsal root and ventral root together known as spinal nerve. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves present in human body. Then there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves present. What do you mean by cranial nerves? Well, actually that is the nerves which originate from the brain. Okay. Then what are the two important functions of spinal cord? Yes, that transmit impulses to and from the brain. Then second one is to coordinate muscular activities during walking, running, etc. Okay. So that's all about the structure of spinal cord and the function of the parts of spinal cord. Spinal cord and brain are the important parts of central nervous system. Then next, we all have certain instances sudden fear, sad, etc. Actually, that is done by the autonomous nervous system. Listen, children. Sometimes our body parts show some accidental responses towards a stimuli. Can you give some examples? Yes, when we touch a hot iron, we withdraw our hands. When something prick on your leg, we withdraw our leg. So these actions are accidental. These actions are accidental responses towards the hot, towards the pin or sharp objects, etc. So that type of actions done by our body is known as reflex action. Actually, it is one of the protective mechanism against the damage of the body parts. So reflex action is the accidental and involuntary responses towards stimuli. Then, very important aspect regarding the reflex action. Most of the reflex action is controlled by the spinal cord. Yes, it takes place beyond our conscious area. because the mechanism of reflex action is done by spinal cord. So here is one question. Why the brain do not play any role for this reflex action? Yes, of course. Some reflex actions are cerebral reflex action. Some of the reflex action or some of the mechanism of reflex action is controlled by the brain. Such reflex actions are called cerebral reflex. What is the word? Cerebral reflex. Can you give one example? Yes, that is blinking of eye is an example. Cerebral reflex. In order to save our body parts from the damage, the responses should be accidental and involuntary. If the brain is taking part that mechanism, what happens? As we studied earlier, thalamus is one of the important part of the brain. All the messages are analyzed or processed before it sent towards the brain. So it takes time. If the action is taking place after some time, the part of the body is damaged. So in order to avoid such kind of situation, our body has a mechanism. There is an accidental and involuntary responses. It is done by the spinal cord. In the case of spinal cord alone decides. That's why it is done by spinal cord. Then second question is, how does this process take place? Reflex action takes place. How does this process take place? So here you can see there are different parts, PARTS, number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, 5. 5 different parts are there. Through all these parts, messages are transmitting. Okay. Then the pathway of reflex action is called the reflex arc. So what is reflex arc? The pathway of reflex action means the pathway of impulses in reflex action. That is known as reflex arc. Okay, reflex arc consists of various parts. Here the word is parts, not part. That's why I'm writing here this is parts. What are the parts of reflex arc? What is the reflex arc? The pathway of impulses in the reflex action is known as reflex arc. It consists of 5 parts. First of all, the receptors. What are receptors? Receptors are modified neurons. If a hot iron touches here, the receptors are stimulated so that impulses are created. Impulses are carried by the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron carries these impulses to the spinal cord. Then there is a new neuron. It is a new term for you. Interneuron. Interneuron connects the sensory neuron with the motor neuron. Sorry for the disturbance. Then, once the impulses are transmitted from the spinal cord, it is carried by the motor neuron. Motor neuron carries the message, take away the hand. It is given to the related muscle so that reflex action held out. So how does this process take place? First, receptors are stimulated. If we say one example, hot iron touches, the receptors are stimulated, impulses are created, impulses are carried by the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron carries these messages or impulses to the spinal cord. Then there is interneuron present that connects sensory neuron and motor neuron. From there, the messages are coming towards the related muscle and the reflex action held out. So, here we can conclude. We have studied the structure of spinal cord and the function of related parts of spinal cord, and what is that accidental responses towards a stimuli called? Yes, well, that is reflex action. Then what do you mean by reflex arc? What are the parts of reflex arc, etc.? You all studied. Okay, children, do you have any doubt? This is the time for interaction. You all unmute. This is the chance to interact ourselves. Okay, okay. Pathway, yes, pathway of impulses. That is known as reflex action, which means the impulses are in the form of electric impulses. All these impulses are transmitted throughout the neuron. One neuron transmits to the next neuron through the synapse. It changes into chemical impulse. Then like that, it passes. So that pathway of impulses in a reflex action is known as reflex arc. Suppose when we take away the hands from the hot iron. So how did you take away the hand from that hot iron? So that what all processes are there in between? Actually what is the pathway? Means from the receptor, it should be carried by the sensory neuron, then interneuron, then again the messages from the spinal cord should be carried by motor neuron, then it should reach to the related muscle. So that pathway is known as reflex arc. Okay, very good. Then anybody else? CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. It is abbreviated as CSF. Okay. In the spinal cord, the CSF is present, more present in the central canal. Yes, what is the next one? The function of CSF. Yes, last class you studied the function of CSF. The CSF is present in the inner layer of the meninges of the brain, of the cerebrum. There you studied there are three important functions that provides oxygen and nutrients, and second one that maintains the pressure of the tissue, and third one that gives good protection. Okay, this is the time to wind up our class. I will send the assignments through WhatsApp. Do it and send it to me personally. Okay, children. Thank you for your wholehearted cooperation and participation for this live class. Thank you. Thank you very much.